Yeah, otherwise we'll kind of segue straight into our final segment of the day, when we're going to have a chat with Charlene from Miss Campbell, who's going to talk to us a little bit more about her own kind of journey and how she's been applying some of what we've been talking about today in terms of creating great imagery and photography and web assets for promoting her brand over the last few years as well. So good afternoon, Charlene. Big thank you for joining us out there. Can you hear me okay at that end?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes. Now, I know that you've got a few slides at that end to go through briefly, just to set a bit of a scene for everybody at that end. So what I'm going to do is make you the host very quickly so that you can share those slides from that end, and then I'll hand over to you perhaps to set the scene for this afternoon by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about Miss Campbell.
Absolutely. So I'm hoping you can see my screen. So my name is Charlene Bent. I'm a celebrity stylist, journalist, and I've worked in the fashion industry for well over 20 years. My career started really by studying fashion design and technology. And then as time went on, I realized there were so many other opportunities within the fashion industry, which is how I arrived about founding a career in media. But whilst I was working as a stylist, I really struggled to get the basics for a lot of my shoots that I was doing. So I do shoots, for example, for X Factor, for OK Magazine, Closer Magazine, New Magazine, and lots of celebrity clients. But I found just some basic things that I would need really to help build on the actual outfit that I was trying to create just weren't readily available. So shapewear is obviously something that's been around for some time, but just basic vests and things that you would think would be easily, readily available were not as accessible. So hence me founding the brand Miss Campbell, which is your wardrobe essentials that you can build your looks on. So it's great for layering up in the winter, and it's also really good to just strip back and lounge at home, really.
Sure.
So I just wanted to talk everyone through a little bit about the brand so you can understand just really how I've arrived at what I do, and really some of the things that we do in terms of our social media presence and any marketing and things like that.
Cool.
So,
if PowerPoint wants to play ball, there we go.
Yeah, I know. Technology. So yeah, so that's essentially it. So Miss Campbell is all handmade to order in the UK. And the reason I approached the brand this way is because fast fashion is huge, and it's definitely a big market because it's affordable and it's quick. So you can order today, have items tomorrow, sometimes even the same day. But really the purpose behind Miss Campbell is to combat climate change in terms of not working to meet the demand in that respect, but really just to ensure that you can have items in your wardrobe that have quality and guaranteed to last, and items that are classics for you rather than something that you'll just wear today to go out tonight and throw away or donate to charity and never see it again.
Sure.
So yeah, so the collection is all handmade to order in the UK. We do our best to be as ethical as possible with all of our approaches, or sustainable rather, with all of our approaches throughout the entire process of the business. So we have our cotton collection, our naked collection. As you can see, it's just a variety of pieces that everyone will always need in her wardrobe. In terms of our social media, this has been quite a huge part of our business and our presence really for building the brand, I would say, in particular in the last 2 years. So initially, I set the business up in 2015 and didn't really have a social media presence for it. And I think it's perhaps because I didn't know the best approach or the right form of communication for it. So sometimes people have social media pages and they don't really know what to post. They don't really know what to talk about. And so I would say when we were forced to be restricted during lockdown, it gave me an opportunity to really visit how we can grow our social media presence and what content people are actually interested in. So something that was mentioned earlier, which I think is really important, is don't be afraid to test things and see what works.
Sure.
And so we found a formula that really worked for us, just to keep it a bit more engaging and connecting the brand with our customer and their interests, really, in terms of our communication.
Okay.
It's worked really well for us. And Instagram in particular is a platform for e-commerce for us too.
Okay.
We worked with influencers, which has also directly impacted sales, and some celebrities, and been featured in quite a few magazines, which we're very proud of. So yeah, and we were also rated most comfortable underwear in Hello magazine, and listed as a emerging lockdown business to look out for with Stylist magazine.
Okay.
So that's essentially it, really, in terms of the background of the business. But yeah, I know you've got some questions for me, Ben. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm really curious to see kind of how that journey's played out for you over the recent years. You mentioned it's something that's been kind of in development for a couple of years now. I mean, when you started out, obviously you came from a kind of a creative background, obviously,
yeah.
and knew you wanted to kind of create these products. Was the digital side of the business kind of something you'd particularly prepared yourself for, or was that something that you very much had to kind of throw yourself in and learn as you've gone?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I found in terms of the digital side of the business is finding my feet with what actually works and what I'm comfortable with. I don't particularly have a huge technology background, so it was really important to me to try to establish a formula that works. But what I realized is there are so many platforms, apps and things available that can completely change things for you, which don't require you to have, like, you know, quite an experienced skill set in anything really. So so yeah, when I started in terms of digital, I had the website, but again, I wasn't quite sure the content that would work or what really needed to be there. So it was very disjointed initially. So I think I kind of went in blind with what was essentially going to work. And that's why I think it always comes back to knowing who your target audience are, understanding your customer, what they are actually interested in. So looking at their life as a whole picture, really, and how you can piece that together with content that you create across social and your website. So with my website, it was very disjointed in the beginning, and also the same with my social media. I'd post a picture of myself, then I'd also have a picture of perhaps, you know, a cat, and then it could also be a picture of a dress that's just launched in the collection, or it was very disjointed. And it was just, so I wanted to keep that communication going, but I wasn't quite sure how to connect it.
Okay. What would you say was the kind of the hardest challenge to get your head around? Because obviously when businesses are kind of starting to make their way, as we've covered on in a few of these sessions today, you know, between setting up your email package, setting up your online store, social media, even before you get to the business of, you know, creating loungewear, there's 100 different things to be kind of thinking about and considering day to day. What would you say was the kind of the hardest thing for you to kind of get your head around, or the steepest learning curve perhaps that you came up against?
I think it was understanding how to communicate with our consumer via social media. I think that was definitely the biggest challenge for me, and it took a little bit of time for me to research the type of content that they'd actually be interested in.
Okay.
And then I actually stripped it back and thought, well, ultimately the brand is loungewear, which would suggest that you're at home. So for it to suggest that you're at home, their interests are going to be related to home. And then as I started to peel back the layers, I realized this is how I can create content that is actually quite engaging and, you know, and evolve that way.
Okay, so presumably spending quite a bit of time in your kind of analytics dashboards within social media, and presumably within the back end of the website as well, starting to try and identify as much as you can in the way of trends about those people.
Absolutely. Know your audience is ultimately the most important thing. So in terms of analytics, I did initially use my website analytics, but then I found Google Analytics to be a lot better for me. It was very transparent. It gave me all the information that I needed. Even in terms of demographic, it wasn't something that I necessarily thought was quite key, but actually it is, because in different parts of the country, we're interested in sometimes very different things. So
Sure.
it's learning how to communicate that through newsletter campaigns, through social media, and through your website content.
Okay. How long would you say it took you to kind of find your the authentic tone of voice and to start to be really clear in what you wanted to do consistently? How long would you say that took you?
Too long.
Okay.
But I would say ultimately, even though the business started in 2015, it was in addition to other parts of my business, for example, working as a stylist, etc. But my main focus on Miss Campbell started about 4 years into the business, and that's when I really found my feet, and then it completely catapulted during lockdown.
Okay. And tell me, in terms of the website itself, has that been, you mentioned that you've obviously been kind of adding to it and changing as you've been kind of going along. What tends to be the really popular, sticky and attractive content to people on the site? Where are the areas you tend to see a lot of kind of engagement with people?
Well, I found that obviously the products that are the best selling are visited the most, but outside of those products, I have a section called Get the Look, which
Okay.
is where I talk about how you can put these items together. So you may buy, for example, a black vest and think, well, it's just a black vest, you know, but in that section, I'm able to visit how you can create different looks with that black vest or how other people have worn it. So it just gives you an idea of the scope with the brand. So I think blogs have always worked really well for people. And so I found this is my version of a blog. So it's a little bit more engaging for Miss Campbell rather
Sure.
than, you know, just some generic copy.
Okay. And what are your kind of primary drivers of traffic to the website? How are you primarily delivering people through to that store on a day-to-day basis? Because that's the name of the game, really, isn't it? Is getting people in the door, much the same as any shop. And ultimately, the more people come in, the more sales are going to organically arrive as a result of that. So what kind of tactics are proving to be the most successful for you in terms of driving that traffic day to day?
It's a combination of different platforms. I couldn't say there's one in particular that is consistent outside of Instagram. Instagram is my most direct link in terms of traffic for Miss Campbell, and it also translates to sales. So you can actually see directly how that has resulted in sales for.
Okay, so it's been kind of a super important part of the mix then over the last couple of years. What kind of content's been the really important, useful content for you? What you mentioned, obviously, you know, you found your particular recipe that works for you, and you know, the interesting thing I always think for me about social media is that, you know, even between fairly similar businesses, the same things won't always necessarily work and be the most important. So perhaps we're not giving away too much of the secret sauce here, but generally, what kind of content strategies and kind of material have you found to be the most kind of effective in terms of driving engagement and ultimately, you know, driving interest and product sales?
I would definitely say partnering with influencers is a
Okay.
very good way to go. You can actually see with those types of campaigns the type of influencer that works really well for your brand, and you can actually see the type of engagement too, which is really nice. So you can interact with consumers that are querying or even just leaving general comments about something that's been worn. So it's nice to have that engagement. So I think where possible, partnering with influencers is a good way to go. Often people think you need to pay influencers to work with them, and the vast majority of them, this is their business and this is their main source of income. However, there are many that will work with brands purely because they like your brand, they like your products, and they would like to be a part of it, and they're happy to do it in exchange for gifting.
Okay. And in terms of that content that you are creating at home, how are you creating content for those channels? How are you kind of approaching that? Are you very much kind of doing stuff at home, very kind of DIY in your approach to
Yeah.
creating video photography, or are you kind of a little bit outgrown from that point now and perhaps in a slightly bigger space? How do you kind of tend to tackle that work day to day?
Well, I have some PR support, which is great, with an agency. So that does help. But outside of that PR support, I do a lot of the work on my phone.
Okay.
These phones are amazing. There are so many different opportunities now with your phone to take great pictures, good video. iMovies is good. Mojo, an app that you told me about, Ben, I use all the time.
Sure.
So, there are so many opportunities to use things on your phone that can create the results that you need. The only thing I would say in terms of creating the content for your website and for your social media is perhaps in terms of imagery. I have always worked with professional photographers just to ensure that I get the right look and feel and it's as chic as it is, because I think it's important to know your skill set too. I think you need to know your limits, but also be brave and be willing to test and do stuff. And if you feel like you've done a great job, fantastic. But for me, I prefer to work with professional photographers so I get the right look and feel.
Okay, well, on the subject of being brave and testing things out, my next question on Instagram was going to be, you mentioned that you've been working on there. It's been a really big, important part of the mix for you over the last couple of years. Are you pretty on top of keeping, making use of all of the new functionality that comes into Instagram over the last couple of years? Live video was the first thing that kind of broke, that became really popular. Stories, obviously, aping the Snapchat functionality, and now Reels doing the same to kind of TikTok and stuff. Are you kind of one of those early adopters that's always very much kind of quick? As soon as a new feature is released, you're looking for ways to adapt that and throw that into the mix as well?
I'd like to think I'm pretty up to date, but I'm sure that's what old people say. I'm sure they say people that are not up to date tend to think they are up to date. So I'm sure my daughter would disagree, because she often thinks, oh gosh, Mum, don't you know how to do this on your phone? So it's so fast that there's a lot to keep up with all the time. But I would like to think that we're definitely maximizing what we can do on Instagram. And in terms of Reels, absolutely. Stories we use all the time. They're great because you don't have to post on your grid. And I think the grid should be sacred, and you just use that for content that you actually want to continue to tell your story on a day-to-day basis. Whereas your story is 24 hours. So you can easily, save it as a highlight if you think it's something important. Like, for example, if we do any special events or anything like that, and I'd love people to go back and see if they were not able to be a part of that event, then we'll save it in our highlights. That's a really good way to create lots of more of a dynamic approach to your Instagram too, is that people can go into your different highlights and learn a little bit more about previous things that you've done. But yeah, I would like to think that we're trying to maximize the opportunity on Instagram.
Absolutely. And I suppose the other great thing about the Reels specifically that you mentioned as well is that it's such a viral opportunity compared to some of the other kind of content types that you can push out into Instagram. Certainly Reels at the moment seems to be reaching a lot more accounts kind of organically that aren't connected to you than other accounts. So if you're looking to kind of grow and reach new people on a regular basis, then yeah, the Reels has been a really useful, really important tool, I know, for a lot of businesses over recent months.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where else are you active on social media? Obviously, we've talked about Instagram quite a lot there. Are there any other platforms that you found to be particularly productive for you from a business point of view?
Yeah, we use Facebook. I've not found Twitter to necessarily be huge for us, and perhaps we don't have enough to say as frequently as Twitter would necessarily require, but maybe that's something we can revisit again in the future. Also, YouTube is really important to us. We create a lot of video content, which I know has been part of the communication today, and it has made a massive difference to us having really strong video content that we can use on our website as well as for potential clients or for anything else.
It's such an engaging kind of content type across the board, isn't it, these days? Video, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, I know you mentioned kind of when we started talking about social media that to start with, you kind of struggled to find your voice a little bit and wondered kind of the right way of positioning the brand online. What advice would you give to the guys here today, or anybody watching the video later, that maybe feels in the same kind of position, that they're not sure exactly what to be posting about, or how often to be posting, or what the right tone is? What advice would you give based on your own experiences of perhaps struggling to find that for a little while before eventually hitting on something that really works for you?
I think know your audience, know exactly what they're interested in, make the most of your analytical tools to help you gauge the type of content that works. If there's a formula, you've got to stick to the formula. And I would also say that it's quite important to visit the consumer by really looking at their entire life. So if you have a competitor, for example, that is also producing a similar type of product, have a look at what they do. I think that's absolutely fine. I think it's fine to have a quick look at what potential competitors are doing, see where they're going wrong, where they're going right, and again, right back to your consumer. It's good to look at the marketplace on a whole and not just your brand, but what's working for your consumer with other brands too, I think is quite important. And once you've narrowed it down, there are definitely opportunities for content. So if it's a swimwear brand, for example, and it's targeted at 25 to 35-year-old women, and I don't know, for example, they're at a particular demographic in their life where they're interested in expanding with their careers or exploring the world or whatever it may be, then it means that you need to visit content that is focused on those areas and look at things that you can talk about on a day-to-day basis that will engage them.
Okay. Tell me, how much time do you spend a week kind of on social media? I guess you can break that down perhaps even into two parts, you know, versus delivering content and talking to people versus perhaps doing that intelligence bit and a bit of the research and almost that hidden part. How much time would you say you spend in those areas each week?
The thing is, I've never actually sat down and calculated the amount of time, but I would guess it's probably a good 10% of my week, if not more. I mean, yeah, because it's a great tool to engage with your customer all the time. So outside of posts, which are done quite easily, there are comments and just communication or instant message that requires just a little bit more of your time. But yeah, it's fun because you're directly discussing things with your consumer and using that platform to really sell your brand.
Okay. Well, we've talked about some of the challenges that you've overcome so far. My last question to you before I open up to anyone else that might have anything else to ask you is with one eye on the future, you know, as we look forward to the rest of 2022 and beyond, what do you see as the biggest challenge or potential shakeup that you think you're going to have to deal with as a business in the digital space over the next couple of years?
I think in terms of the digital space, as a business, we have had to adjust our pricing with the recent hikes across everything, really. And it's finding a way to keep the consumer interested digitally, knowing that now the price point's a little bit higher. And I think ultimately it's working on being consistent with your tone so that they are interested and moving and growing with you. And I think that's ultimately, with any brand, what will be the next big challenge is keeping your customers going forward, especially now we're out of restrictions. But even though we're out of restrictions, I can foresee a recession coming. so it's like, you know, how can we now utilize these digital platforms to keep people interested, keep them spending and growing with your brand? So that's something I'm looking at the moment, and hopefully I'll be able to ride the wave.
It's going to be an interesting one, isn't it? But well, you've clearly been doing the right thing so far and ridden out the last 2 years of the pandemic of our time. So I'd say you've arguably got exactly the right footing in place to deal with whatever comes down the pipe next, actually. But thank you very much. That was really interesting from my side. I wonder at this point whether anybody else has got any questions that they'd like to ask Charlene. I can see a couple in the questions of the live chat. Sarah, there was a couple from you. I wonder if perhaps you wanted to chime in.
Hello.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, nice to meet you. Really enjoyed the looking back over your business. It's a really interesting business. And although I think I'm in quite a different field, I can definitely see so many familiar kind of, stages that you've been through that I've been through as well.
Of course, I think we all go through things, don't we? And we're all in it together. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you, we did find during lockdown things absolutely well, it changed a lot because a lot of people suddenly took up crafting, which is what I'm in, and they had the time to do it. And what's happening now is that everybody's lives have just become so much busier, and we put a whole kind of focus on messaging about how great it was staying at home, and like how we've just released a joggers pattern, and a lot of our patterns became very loungewear based, just in time to release them in time for people booking holidays, going out again, doing stuff. And it feels really like, oh God, how did we not see this coming? But yeah, that's kind of, it's like an interesting insight that I think, our companies, even though they're very different, are experiencing a similar thing.
Yeah, but ultimately, if they are now starting to travel, surely it's something they can take with them.
Yes.
So it's something that you market in that area that, this is great. It's something that you can travel with. It's, you can put it in your carry-on luggage, or you can, take it for your staycations, and you can still actively be part of this.
Yeah. So I suppose it is about changing your messaging, isn't it? Being very reactive and being very engaged with what your consumer is actually doing at all times. And that's something that I think it's quite easy to not be when you work in a little studio away from everything. So that's definitely a tip that I'll take away.
I think ultimately just following your consumer, what they're doing. And I do also believe it's nice to look at what competitors are doing, so you can get a full overview of the marketplace and you can see what's working in that moment. So if they're going on holiday, then we can talk to them about crafting on holiday. So I think there's definitely so much opportunity, and it's just moving with the times and growing with them.
Definitely. One of my questions that I asked in the chat was, do you use affiliate links when you work with influencers, or do you use do you give them kind of a payback in any way, even if you don't pay them to actually do the work for you?
So in terms of, do I provide products for them and they tag Ms. Campbell, or I'm not sure I understand?
So one thing that I've been looking at is, so if somebody mentions us in their blog or in their YouTube video, you can put in links that then I can track, and I can give them commission on the sales.
Yeah, Amazon do something very similar, don't they? Yeah.
It seems a lot safer for me, rather than paying somebody, a couple of £100 to back something. If I can pay them for the work after I've got the return, it's beneficial for both parties, I feel.
Yeah, 100%. I haven't actually used affiliate links, but I would highly recommend it. It's definitely a safer approach. And especially as a small business, you just want to tread really carefully when you're stepping into working with influencers, just to make sure that you're going down the right road, because you may find actually my influencer is not this person, it's this person. So that's why finding it does take a little while to just do a few tests. So I wouldn't spend too much money on it. I would literally do exactly what you're thinking about with affiliate links. I think that would definitely be the safest approach with influencers. But you'll definitely see some impact.
I've had good and bad experiences, and I've had people that I've paid money to that nothing's come out of it. I've had people that I've given product to that, again, nothing's come out of it. And then I've had people that have approached me and said, I'd like this product, and then it's been amazing. They've created a huge amount of sales, and it's kind of, I think the people that show interest in the first place rather than being approached are probably the ones to start off with, aren't they?
I definitely think so. And I also think it's fine to have terms and conditions and draw up an agreement so it's clear and in black and white. So on both sides, we know what the expectations are. And then that way you've covered yourself and they know what they're walking into with you. So it's very difficult as a small business. We don't want to spend too much money unless we know it's something that's definitely going to give us a return. So I would probably stick with affiliates to start with and then take it from there.
Thank you.
course, with my digital marketing hat on, you've also, I suppose, got the option of kind of taking the approach where you actually kind of incentivize people that are already perhaps buying your products as well, you know, and if people are tagging you on social media as a result of buying their products, and you can incentivize that process, then you've almost got some skin in the game from them before you're kind of engaging them as a champion as well. You know, that could be one option to look at.
Well, the first presenter mentioned about the tell a friend marketing.
Sure.
And I thought that was something that I hadn't come across at all. I thought that was really, really interesting. So yeah, I'm definitely, that was Zane, I think he mentioned.
Zaid, yes.
Zaid, sorry. Yeah, and I think that's definitely something I'm going to look into.
Perfect. Ismay, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, hi Charlene.
Hi Ismay, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I love what you're doing. It's really, really interesting, and I can see a lot of parallels. So I wanted to ask, I assume your price point is quite high, being sustainable and made in the UK, similar to mine. How do you? A lot of people love what I do, but as soon as they find out the price, they're like, oh, I can't afford that. But you're paying for quality, you're paying for the ethics and the sustainability. And how do you kind of get that message of value across, to try and shift people towards actually buying?
I think ultimately you do have an audience and you do have customers that are specifically interested in that. So you've got to believe in that from the start and know that there are people that don't want to spend £100 on something that's made in the UK, but there are equally people that will spend £500 on something that's made on the UK because they're committed to that. So I think ultimately what's most important is to be as transparent about what your brand ethics are on your social media and on your website. Create maybe a page on your website that really talks about your brand story and really engages people. And then you can use snippets of that content with your social media as well, and any images that echo that over time, just so you keep the message consistent and you keep talking about it so people understand what they're buying into. I think sometimes if people think it's a fast fashion brand, they're disappointed by price point. But when they understand actually that's not what we do. So as long as you're clear about who you are, you'd be surprised how many people are actually really excited and want to be part of that. So I completely understand exactly what you're talking about, because that was one of the challenges that I had in the beginning, is that people would think, pay that for a robe? Like, I could probably buy one for £10 at, I don't know, Boohoo or wherever it may be. But actually, that's fast fashion, and this is an ethical, sustainable brand, and it's made in the UK. It's made to order. So this is what you're buying into. That's the consumer we're interested in. And once you start echoing that across your platforms and create, for me, Get the Look was a blog that worked, but for you, it could perhaps be something that discusses the process in which you're making your garments, or whatever it may be that your audience are actually interested in engaging and learning more about. And I just continue to grow on that.
Yeah, thanks. I think I very much do that. I think it's just a case of maybe building up my audience slowly, I guess, and getting in front of the right people. And I know I brought a sweatshirt for my son the other day. He was the muse and model of the brand. He's now 12 and refuses to wear any of it and just wants to wear black clothes all the time, which is fine. But I was quite shocked at actually how much Nike and Reebok cost, and it's not a dissimilar price point. And so actually I wonder if there's some story I can do within that of like, well, this is made in the UK, you could buy this, but this has got a story behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you reached out to any bloggers or any online platforms like websites? So I've worked with a lot of online magazines that are actually interested in that story and they want to talk about it. That's another great way to get links back to your website. So I would definitely look at partnering with online magazines, running competitions too, so people can learn a bit more about the brand. Competitions is something that works really well. And it's a great way for someone to feel like they're getting something for free, but actually they're also learning about your product. So I would definitely look at partnering with online platforms. I think link exchanges or links pointing to your website can only be a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. Okay,
What certainly one area that we found benefits pairing people up with in the past has been podcasts in terms of raising brand awareness, which is obviously a great platform from a number of perspectives from a business. Obviously, from a straight advertising point of view, it's a really engaged audience because, you know, there isn't a native way to block or skip adverts in a podcast. The hosts are often the ones reading it, so you end up with that kind of implicit endorsement as well. But actually, there will be, you know, lots and lots of podcasts out there around fashion, sustainable living, sustainability generally, you know, innovative new businesses, without pandering, female-led businesses. There will be all kinds of audiences out there that will be really interested in talking to you and sharing that story with you. And again, it gives you the opportunity to discuss your values, demonstrate your own kind of experience and stuff in the background in a much deeper way than you could in perhaps a tweet or a Facebook message and stuff as well.
Definitely. And just one more thing is, mate, that circular economy is a huge topic of conversation at the moment. So I would look at opportunities to share content about that and how your brand are part of that journey on your website and on your social platforms. And that in itself can create a press release that you can share with online magazines to feature your brand.
Yeah, I have got a couple of podcasts lined up. Sarah Vaughan from Start Somewhere, who's like the Marie Claire sustainability editor. I've got that lined up, and another eco sustainability one. So I'm kind of looking out for anything I can kind of get on and get featured in as much as possible. Yeah,
that's brilliant, and that's definitely something to shout about. That helps to build your presence too.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Where you've got the people that are sensitive to price and perhaps people that are prepared to look past a slightly higher price point, I think, for a premium product and a quality product, yeah, any opportunity that you can get to put yourself in front of them in whatever format or medium, I think is definitely well worth investigating. I wonder, unless anybody else has got any other questions at that end. I noticed one other message in the chat, I think it might have come from you, Sarah, that was saying you'd had some issues keeping messaging focused on social media. Oh, can you hear us at that end all right?
Yeah, I just think with so many things going on and trying to keep track of what my customers are interested in, it's easy to get very pushed off focus on the message that you need to get across. So one thing I've started doing is kind of creating a social media plan for the month, and with me and my business partner getting on really well with actually following that. And we've had to be incredibly self-disciplined with it. And that's what you were saying about stories being the place to kind of dump all the rest of the stuff that's going on.
Yeah,
is ideal. Yeah, you're right. The grid is definitely sacred, or needs to be more sacred than it is.
Absolutely. And I live by content plans. I think if you've got a content plan, it just pieces everything together. It's nicely scheduled, and you know what you're talking about, rather than what can I say today. And then that's when it can get messy. So it's always better to have a content plan across your platform, so you know what you're talking about and it echoes your brand throughout. And yeah, using the stories just for those short things that you don't mind talking about today, just so you're active. Keeping your grid for things that need to be there.
Perfect.
Man, do you know what? At about 11 a.m. this morning in my presentation, one of my slides was a well thought out social media content plan will be the core of driving substantial traffic through to your website. And we've come full circle by the end of the day to exactly the same point, Charlene. It's like our minds are linked.
Absolutely. But it's the truth. Content is king, and it always has been, and it will continue to be.